Have you ever felt a deep, gut-wrenching fear that something wasn't right with someone you love? That's exactly what happened when Benedetta, a caring but tough elderly mother, decided to visit her daughter unexpectedly. What she found wasn't just a sick daughter, it was a chilling mystery hidden behind the walls of a luxurious mansion. The kind of secret that makes your heart race, like finding a shadow lurking in a well-lit room. You might think you know your family well, but sometimes, the truth is buried so deep that it takes a storm to bring it to the surface. As the layers of deceit and manipulation start to peel away, this story reveals the lengths a mother will go to protect her child. It's a tale of sacrifice, of confronting harsh truths, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and daughter, tested like never before. Stick around, because what unfolds next will have you questioning everything you thought you knew about trust and loyalty. And if you enjoy gripping stories like this, don't forget to like this video and hit that subscribe button so you won't miss any of the incredible content we have in store. Benedetta, an elderly mother marked by the years, felt a heavy weight in her chest. It had been weeks since she last heard from her daughter Fernanda, and the silence was unbearable. A mother's sacrifice never truly ends, right? So she decided to make an unannounced visit to Fernanda's mansion. As she arrived, the grand home seemed colder than she remembered, wrapped in a kind of family mystery that she couldn't quite shake off. The well-kept garden and the towering gates couldn't hide the emptiness she felt deep inside. Stepping inside, Benedetta was greeted by her son-in-law, Enrique, always impeccably dressed, but something felt off. His smile seemed forced, and his eyes wouldn't quite meet hers. "How's Fernanda?" she asked, her tone light but her mind racing to understand what was happening. Enrique gave vague answers, avoiding eye contact. There was something wrong, a hidden truth she couldn't yet grasp, but a mother's intuition rarely falters. It was as if something was out of place, and she knew she needed to get to the bottom of it. As Enrique spoke, his gestures seemed exaggerated, almost like he was overcompensating for something. Benedetta noticed every small detail, like a detective looking for clues. He avoided talking directly about her daughter, steering the conversation towards the weather or his work. What should have been a regular visit now felt different. Fernanda's silence and Enrique's odd behavior stirred something inside Benedetta, a sense that she was on the brink of uncovering a much deeper family mystery. She slowly walked through the house, pretending to admire the decorations, but really searching for any sign of trouble. The entire place felt shrouded in shadows, not just from the drawn curtains, but from the weight of unspoken words. The silence was unsettling, almost suffocating, and the absence of her daughter's voice gnawed at her. For a moment, she recalled Fernanda's childhood, the laughter, the games, the innocence, all now replaced by an eerie void. Benedetta felt the sacrifice of all those years pressing down on her more than ever. As she made her way upstairs, Benedetta heard a muffled sound, like someone whispering. She froze and held her breath. From behind a slightly open door, she saw a shadow quickly pass by. She stepped back, her heart racing, trying to stay calm. It was Enrique, whispering into the phone. "Yes, she's here now. Don't worry, I'll handle it." He didn't notice her there, and Benedetta felt a chill run down her spine. This was the first real sign that the family mystery was even deeper than she'd imagined. What was meant to be a comforting visit only raised more questions. Benedetta realized that finding the truth would require her to dig beneath the surface. Enrique's odd behavior and Fernanda's complete silence were no mere coincidences. Deep down, she knew something was terribly wrong, but what could it be? Just like in life, where sacrifice leads to understanding, she was about to embark on a journey that would demand far more than she ever expected. The next step? Finding out who else was involved. Benedetta couldn't shake the unease she felt as she made her way through the mansion. It wasn't just the silence, it was the energy of the place. When she finally saw her daughter, she was startled. Fernanda, once vibrant and full of life, looked frail and sickly, as if a shadow had swallowed her whole. "Are you feeling all right, my dear?" Benedetta asked, her voice soft but filled with worry. Fernanda gave a weak smile, but there was no light behind it, only a familiar lost look that spoke volumes. The unease turned to suspicion when Benedetta noticed the head housekeeper, Jessica. There was something calculated in her movements, like she was performing a ritual she knew all too well. Jessica handled the tray of medicine with a kind of precision that didn't feel right. The way she avoided Benedetta's gaze was another red flag. It was subtle, but Benedetta sensed it, a truth being buried right in front of her eyes. In moments like these, she remembered the old saying, "Where there's smoke, there's fire." Fernanda's condition didn't seem like an ordinary illness. Benedetta's heart raced as she watched her daughter's eyes glaze over after taking her medicine. It was as if she was drifting away, caught in a haze of confusion. Benedetta couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling that something was being hidden from her. Every mother knows her child's heartbeat better than her own, and right now, Fernanda's pulse felt off. She had seen her daughter go through struggles before, but this was different, a family mystery that begged to be unraveled. At dinner, the air was thick with tension. Enrique kept the conversation light, almost too light, while Jessica hovered nearby, ready to intervene at any moment. It was like a performance where everyone knew their role, everyone except Benedetta. She watched Jessica closely as she prepared Fernanda's next dose of pills. The way she poured the medication, measuring each drop with care, sent a chill down Benedetta's spine. Could this be a coincidence? Or was it the beginning of a darker truth she wasn't ready to face yet? Late that night, when everyone had retreated to their rooms, Benedetta couldn't sleep. Her mind replayed the events of the day, piecing together the small but significant moments she had witnessed. She decided to take a closer look. Quiet as a whisper, she made her way to the kitchen and found Jessica's stash of medicine bottles. Benedetta's hands shook as she read the labels, recognizing names she had only heard in stories of slow creeping poison. It was in that moment she knew her suspicions weren't just fears. They were the beginnings of a painful, undeniable truth. The reality hit her like a tidal wave. Fernanda wasn't just sick, she was being kept this way, manipulated by those she trusted most. The depth of the betrayal left Benedetta breathless, but there was no time to dwell on it. The mystery surrounding her daughter was growing darker, and it was clear that Jessica wasn't just a bystander. Benedetta realized she would need help to uncover the full truth. But who could she trust in a house full of secrets? Benedetta knew she needed an ally, someone who shared her suspicions and had seen what she couldn't. As she stepped outside into the garden, she noticed Carlos, the gardener. He was a man of few words, but with a kind, weathered face that held the wisdom of many years. "Carlos," she called softly, "have you noticed anything strange about Fernanda lately?" He hesitated, looking around as if the walls had ears. With a heavy sigh, he nodded. The secrets of the family were rooted deeper than the flowers he tended to. Carlos had his own doubts about the house staff, especially Jessica. "I've seen her," he whispered, leaning in closer. "Messing with the medicine bottles, switching things around." His voice was barely audible, as if saying the words out loud might bring danger upon them both. Benedetta felt a shiver down her spine. It wasn't just her imagination. There was a real plot unfolding right under her nose. Sacrifice and truth were becoming entwined, and she could feel the weight of the family mystery pressing down on them both. It was clear to Benedetta that Carlos had been watching quietly, gathering his own pieces of the puzzle. He shared how he had noticed Jessica's peculiar behavior, how she would linger near Fernanda's room, always attentive, always lurking. "I've worked here for years," he said. "But lately, it feels like I'm in a different place. There's a darkness here now, something that wasn't here before." His words confirmed what Benedetta already feared. Her daughter was trapped in a web of deceit. Benedetta and Carlos decided to form a quiet alliance, understanding that speaking openly could put them at risk. "We need proof," Benedetta whispered. "Something concrete that we can use to protect Fernanda." Carlos nodded, agreeing without hesitation. Together, they planned to keep an eye on Jessica, watching her every move. It was a risky endeavor, but there was no other choice. For the sake of her daughter's life, Benedetta had to push forward, even if it meant diving deeper into this twisted family secret. The days that followed were filled with subtle glances and silent exchanges between Benedetta and Carlos. They developed a silent language of their own, a way to communicate without alerting the others. One day, Carlos approached her with a small bottle he'd found in the trash near Jessica's quarters. "I don't know what this is, but it doesn't belong with the rest of the medications," he said, handing it to Benedetta. She recognized the name immediately. It was a powerful sedative, one that could easily be used to control or weaken someone. Benedetta's resolve hardened. The sacrifice she had made by stepping into this house, facing the unknown, was leading her closer to the truth. With Carlos by her side, she felt a renewed sense of hope. Together, they had the beginnings of evidence, but it was just the start. The true challenge would be gathering enough proof to confront the sinister forces at play. As she clutched the bottle, she realized that this was only the beginning. The storm was coming, and she needed to be ready. Benedetta knew she couldn't rely on intuition alone. With Carlos as her trusted ally, they began a secret investigation. Every glance, every whispered conversation was filled with urgency. They started by watching Jessica's daily routine, when she brought the medications, when she lingered by Fernanda's room, and especially when she met with Enrique. "We need proof," Benedetta said quietly to Carlos. "Without it, we're just two paranoid old folks." But in her heart, she knew they were closer to uncovering a sinister truth buried in this family. Late one night, they crept into the study where Enrique kept his files. Carlos stood guard as Benedetta rifled through the drawers, her hands shaking with adrenaline. She found a small locked box. "It has to be here," she whispered. Using a paperclip, she managed to pop the lock open. Inside were documents that made her blood run cold. Prescriptions for heavy sedatives, all signed by a doctor whose name she didn't recognize. "Look at this," she showed Carlos. "This isn't medicine to heal. It's medicine to control." The evidence was mounting, but it wasn't enough. They needed something undeniable, something that would force the truth into the light. One morning, as Jessica stepped out for a break, Benedetta snuck into the kitchen. There she found a small vial hidden in a drawer behind the silverware, labeled with a name she knew all too well, a slow-acting poison often used in old crime stories. "She's not just giving medicine," Benedetta thought. "She's poisoning my daughter." It was a horrifying realization, but it gave her the resolve she needed. Carlos had been watching from the garden and quickly joined her, his face pale as she showed him the vial. "This is worse than I imagined," he said. They knew it wasn't safe to confront Jessica or Enrique directly, not yet. Instead, they devised a plan to swap out the vial and replace it with something harmless. It was a risky move, but it bought them time. "We'll need more than this," Carlos reminded her. "We need to catch them in the act." Benedetta nodded, her determination hardening like steel. The next step was to set a trap. With the help of a small hidden camera Carlos had picked up, they managed to install it in Fernanda's room without anyone noticing. The idea was simple: capture Jessica administering the medication. It took days of careful planning and watching. But finally, they had their moment. The camera recorded Jessica pouring drops from the suspicious vial into Fernanda's tea, her face calm, almost serene. It was the proof they needed, a chilling scene that showed the truth. This wasn't care, this was premeditated harm. The weight of the discovery left Benedetta breathless. She looked at Carlos, her eyes filled with tears of both relief and fear. "We have to get her out of here," she said, her voice barely a whisper. It was no longer just about uncovering the mystery. It was about saving her daughter's life. There was no turning back now. With the video in hand, they were ready to take action, but they knew the clock was ticking. The final showdown was coming, and they had to be prepared for whatever would happen next. Benedetta knew time was running out. With Carlos by her side, they decided it was now or never. They had enough proof, but if they waited any longer, it might be too late for Fernanda. One evening, while Jessica and Enrique were occupied in the study, they made their move. Benedetta rushed to her daughter's room, finding Fernanda lying there, weak and pale. "I'm getting you out of here," she whispered, her voice filled with a mix of fear and fierce determination. Fernanda's eyes fluttered open, a glimmer of hope piercing through the fog of her illness. Carlos had the car ready, parked near the back entrance. He knew the risks. They were up against powerful people who wouldn't think twice about silencing them. As they helped Fernanda down the stairs, every creak of the floorboards felt like an alarm bell. "Hurry," Carlos urged, casting nervous glances over his shoulder. They reached the back door just as Jessica's footsteps echoed from the hallway. "We can't stop now," Benedetta said, gripping Fernanda's hand tightly. The cold night air hit them as they dashed outside, escaping into the darkness. The drive to the clinic felt like it took an eternity. Benedetta held Fernanda close, stroking her hair and whispering comforting words, though her own heart raced with fear. "Hang on, my love," she pleaded. Carlos sped through the empty streets, his hands gripping the wheel as if he could steer them away from the nightmare they'd just escaped. "We're almost there," he assured Benedetta, though he wasn't sure if he was convincing her or himself. It was a desperate journey, a mother's sacrifice, driven by nothing but love and the need to save her child. They arrived at a private clinic, far from the city's prying eyes. The doctors quickly took Fernanda in, and Benedetta could see the concern on their faces. After what felt like hours, a physician came out, shaking his head. "You did the right thing bringing her here," he said. "She's been poisoned, but we can counteract it. It will be a slow recovery, though." Benedetta felt her knees buckle, a mix of relief and exhaustion washing over her. She looked at Carlos, and they shared a moment of silent victory. They had fought against the odds and won this battle. While Fernanda was being treated, Benedetta and Carlos waited in the hallway, the fluorescent lights casting long, harsh shadows. Benedetta thought about everything that had led them here, the family secrets, the betrayals, the hidden truths. "We need to take this to the police," Carlos said, breaking the silence. Benedetta nodded, though the thought of reliving the ordeal made her stomach churn. But she knew it had to be done. They couldn't just save Fernanda. They had to bring justice for all the pain that had been caused. As the dawn light filtered through the hospital windows, Benedetta felt a strange mix of exhaustion and hope. Fernanda was safe, at least for now. But this wasn't the end. It was merely the start of a new chapter, one that would demand more courage, more sacrifice, and the strength to face the truth head-on. She took a deep breath and looked at Carlos. "We've come this far," she said. "Now, we need to finish what we started." The storm wasn't over yet, but they were ready for whatever came next. With the evidence in hand, Benedetta and Carlos went straight to the police. It was a tense moment, sitting in that cold, sterile office, laying out the story that sounded almost too twisted to believe. The officer listened intently, examining the video footage and the documents they'd collected. "This is serious," he said, looking up at them. "If what you're saying is true, we're dealing with attempted murder." Benedetta felt a shiver run through her. This was no longer just a family mystery. It was a matter of life and death, and the truth had to come out. The investigation moved quickly. Armed with the evidence Benedetta and Carlos had gathered, the police arrived at the mansion early the next morning. Jessica was the first to be questioned, her cold, calculated demeanor finally cracking under the pressure. "I was only following orders," she spat, throwing a glance towards Enrique. It was a chilling admission, confirming what Benedetta had feared all along. This wasn't just a mistake or negligence. It was a premeditated act, a betrayal by those closest to Fernanda. Enrique, too, was brought in for questioning. He tried to maintain his calm, polished facade, but the cracks were beginning to show. "This is a misunderstanding," he insisted. "You have no idea what you're talking about." But the evidence was undeniable. The video footage, the altered prescriptions, the testimonies from the clinic, it all painted a clear picture of a man willing to sacrifice his own wife for control, for power. Benedetta watched from the other side of the glass, her heart heavy but filled with a new kind of resolve. When the charges were read, it was like a weight lifted off Benedetta's shoulders. Attempted murder, conspiracy, and endangerment. All serious accusations that would keep both Enrique and Jessica behind bars for a long time. As they were led away in handcuffs, Benedetta felt a mix of emotions, relief, sadness, and a profound sense of loss. This was the man her daughter had once loved, the woman she had trusted in her own home. It was a painful reminder of how the truth, when hidden for too long, could tear a family apart. The trial was swift but thorough. The judge, after reviewing the evidence, had little doubt about their guilt. The courtroom was silent as the verdict was read, guilty on all counts. Benedetta closed her eyes, tears streaming down her cheeks, not just for the victory, but for everything they had lost along the way. The truth had come out, but it had left a scar on her family that would never fully heal. Carlos squeezed her hand, a silent gesture of support, reminding her that they had faced this storm together. Walking out of the courthouse, Benedetta took a deep breath, feeling the sunlight on her face. It was a new day, a chance to rebuild and to move forward. The fight for justice had been long and painful, but it had been worth every sacrifice. She turned to Carlos and gave a small, weary smile. "We did it," she said. "We brought the truth to light." But even as she spoke, she knew there was still a long road ahead, a path of healing and reconciliation that would take time. The storm had passed, but the journey wasn't over. The weeks after the trial were a blur of emotions for both Benedetta and Fernanda. The clinic became a safe haven, a place where Fernanda could begin her long road to recovery. She was still fragile, both physically and emotionally, but each day brought small signs of improvement. Benedetta stayed by her side, refusing to leave. She knew that this was a chance to rebuild their bond, a rare moment when the past and its sacrifices didn't matter as much as the present. "I'm here now," she would whisper to her daughter. "We'll get through this together." There were days when Fernanda struggled, her memories clouded by the effects of the poison and the betrayal she had endured. "How did I not see it?" she would ask, her voice filled with pain and confusion. Benedetta's heart ached every time, but she would hold her daughter's hand and say, "You weren't meant to see it. That was their plan all along. But you survived, and that's what matters." It was a slow process, filled with tears and moments of doubt, but also moments of clarity and understanding that brought them closer than ever. As Fernanda regained her strength, she and Benedetta began to talk about the things they had never addressed before: the lost years, the sacrifices they had both made, and the truths they had kept hidden from each other. It was like peeling back layers of an old wound, painful but necessary. "I always thought you were disappointed in me," Fernanda admitted one day, her voice trembling. Benedetta was taken aback, her eyes filling with tears. "Disappointed," she said. "I've only ever been proud of you, my dear. I wish I had shown it more." They decided to spend more time together, away from the shadows of the past. Benedetta suggested small outings, a walk in the park, lunch at their favorite cafe, even visiting the beach where they used to go when Fernanda was a child. It was an attempt to create new memories, to fill the empty spaces left by the recent turmoil. Slowly but surely, they found a rhythm, a new sense of normalcy that felt like a fresh start. The family mystery had brought them to the brink, but it was also leading them back to each other. Carlos, who had become like a part of their family, often joined them. He was the silent hero, the one who had stepped in when no one else would. "You saved me too," Fernanda told him one day, her voice filled with gratitude. He smiled, brushing off the praise. "I just did what needed to be done," he said, but they all knew it was more than that. It was his loyalty, his quiet strength, that had helped them through the darkest times. The three of them shared a bond now, one forged through sacrifice and the pursuit of truth. As the months passed, Fernanda's health continued to improve, and so did her spirit. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was living. She and Benedetta talked about the future, about plans they had once abandoned. "Maybe we should go on that road trip we always talked about," Fernanda suggested one evening, her eyes sparkling with a light Benedetta hadn't seen in years. "Just the two of us." It was a simple idea, but it represented everything they had fought for: freedom, healing, and the chance to live without the weight of the past. After this incredible journey, it's clear how painful but liberating the truth can be. Benedetta showed us that even when the evidence is hard to face, the sacrifice of fighting for justice is worth every moment. How many times have you felt that something was wrong but ignored your intuition? Maybe it's time to listen to that feeling and take action, just like Benedetta did. What would you do if you discovered a loved one was in danger, hidden behind secrets and lies. Now it's your turn. Apply this lesson to your own life. Trust your gut feeling, question what seems off, and don't be afraid to seek the truth, no matter how painful it might be. And if this message resonated with you, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and leave a comment sharing how much you enjoyed the story. Turn on notifications so you never miss more content like this, and stay tuned for stories that could transform your perspective.